Welcome back to Monster in My Closet, the podcast where we shine a light on the professional world's darker corners. I'm Anil Saxena, joined by my co-host, the founder of Medusas, Morgan Hunter. Each episode, we tackle the fears and faux pas that haunt our work lives, with insights, interviews, and a dash of humor, some stupid analogies, and probably swearing. So if you've ever felt like you're navigating a workplace labyrinth, a never-ending approval process, an evil hall of mirrors, or a constantly ending quarter, you're in the right place. Let's confront those monsters together. Are you ready? Let's begin. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Monster in My Closet. Hey Morgan, so this week, are we scared or scary?
Scared.
Scared. Like really scared or just like kind of scared?
I tell you, this topic triggers me. So if for no other reason you're scared of Morgan, right? I can get wound up on this.
Yes. And I can attest that Morgan can be scary. So in this episode that we're calling Plagues of Locus, we're going to be sail into the shifting winds of blame and discover how this age-old plague can create a bottomless pit of blame and helplessness. We'll explore the haunting consequences of blaming outside forces for personal failures and learn how to banish these specters by embracing personal responsibility. So 3 big things that we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to explore and define locus of control. So the overview of internal and external locus of control and their psychological underpinnings. As a reminder, neither Morgan and I are psychologists or licensed therapists, but we have opinions about how the brain works. Second, we're going to talk about the impact of the external locus of control in the workplace, how an external locus of control can negatively affect job performance and workplace dynamics and make the place a whole lot less fun. And third, we're going to talk about some strategies to shift from external to internal locus of control, some practical tips and techniques for individuals to take more personal responsibility. So this is a topic that you and I have kind of talked about a lot, right, in our conversations and in our working together. So what's the difference between internal and external locus of control? And maybe most importantly, why should anybody care?
Yeah. So I'm going to give layman's definition of these so as not to get overly complicated. If I have an external locus of control, that means that for the most part, I don't feel like I'm in control of the things that happen to me in my life, right? So if something bad happens, it is because some external force or person caused it to happen, and I am just the receiver of the horribleness in that case. Internal locus of control is when you feel like you do have a significant amount of influence over the events in your life and that you're kind of substantially in control of events and that you can do things to change those events. And just a very simple example of an external locus of control is, the dog ate my homework kind of thing, right? But your dog ate the homework for the 10th time. It's like, come on, right? Like, put your homework somewhere else or the dog can't get it. So I see this a lot in the workplace, people with external locuses of control. And it's very frustrating because even when you come up with all the excuses about why something didn't get done or why something went wrong, the excuses don't get you any further down the line, right? They don't get you towards a solution or to anything that's mitigating the problem. So I'll stop there, Anil.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's funny, my Sheree talks a lot about like, I don't want to hear your excuses. And I think there is something really powerful about having an internal belief that you have some control over your destiny. Not like everything, like I can't stop the rain, but I could, my reaction to the rain is under my control. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think, if you think about in work, if, you've got Bob and Jane that are going for a promotion, and Bob has an external locus of control belief, and Jane has an internal one. And in that going for a promotion, Jane believes if I work hard and push myself and do extra, then I'm going to have a higher likelihood of getting this. And if I don't get it, I'm going to look at what is it that I could have done more of or less of or whatever. If
Mhm.
Bob has an external locus of control, he might be of the belief that it's sort of chance, or it's the boss that didn't like me, or they wanted to put a woman in there instead of me, and so even though I'm more qualified, it's because of
Mhm.
DEI, and it makes you a little less powerful, right? It takes your power away when you have that external locus of control. And the other thing that makes me think about is in the workplace when you have an external locus of control, or when that's rampant, there tends to be this idea of fiercely holding on to what you can control or what you believe you can control. And it kind
Mhm.
of leads to learned helplessness. I think that idea of I don't want to change things because I know this and this is under my control.
Well, this is totally random.
As are
I
most things.
used, I used to have that fiercely holding on to stuff. I used to work at this place, and there was an office manager. You had to go to him for all the office supplies, and I went in and asked for some paper clips, a box of paper clips, and he got a box out, and he says, "How many do you need?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "All of them. I want a box of paper clips." But you're not going to use all of them right now. So how many? And he was like doling out the paper. But I feel like that's what you're saying. Like he is holding on to that control because that's the control he has in his life, is to dole out the paper clips.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is such a good example of how, when you have that external locus of control, and again, right, that disclaimer that I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, I just have life experience. But there is this notion that once you create something or once you have something kind of under your control, if your belief is that you don't have a lot of autonomy in being able to influence how things work, there's a tendency to want to hold on to that.
Mm.
So that's
Mm.
what I've seen. And I remember I had this job in college, or right out of college, where I was responsible for seminar enrollments, and I couldn't get people to sign up. Um, and in my infinite wisdom of my child brain, I said, I'm going to make up attendees because I have to win. And so the only way that I can win is I got to make up people that
Ooh,
signed up for this thing.
that worked out for
Oh,
you.
it was a huge failure. Epic huge failure. Because people noticed. They're like, hey, these 30 people, they didn't show. So it wasn't like a secret, and they weren't even real fucking people. It took me a long time to accept that I, that I did have control over that, and there were actions that I didn't take, and things that I didn't do that that led to that happening. It wasn't it. There were things that were under my control that I could have done more or
It's
less of.
it's sticky though. I totally agree with you, because I was going through this thought process the other day, and I feel like I have an internal locus of control, but that doesn't mean I can't slide towards the bad behavior. And so I did this effort, and my internal dialogue was, I've done everything I can. I don't understand why this isn't working. Um, and then I'm like, hey, girl, have you really,
Yeah,
really done everything you can? So I went through the list. Well, I could do this. I could do this. There's like 50 things. And so I'm like, I haven't really done everything I can. So the big question is, and here's the meat, is either I'm not qualified to do the things that need to be done, or I simply don't want to do them and I need to face the music on that.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's really uncomfortable. So I can understand why people like had this thing happen or this thing happen. And that's why I couldn't, that's why I had to make up attendees. I had a very similar thing. I didn't make up attendees, but, I worked at the Chamber of Commerce, and I have these very idealistic views of, chambers of commerce. And I was the person that called up and tried to get people to join the Chamber of Commerce. And after a week, I hadn't gotten a single person to join the Chamber of Commerce. And I'm like, I suck at this. Yeah. This is not my gig. I should never be cold calling anybody. I am just not good at it. But you have to be willing to kind of look inward and go, yeah, I suck, or that's not my forte to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a powerful lesson to learn if you really learn it. Right. I mean, I think some people go through their whole lives and they're like, being put upon, when in actuality, they have tons of control in outcomes and if not outcomes, at least their reactions to what is happening in their world. Right. I think you could not to get too political here, but right. So when 9/11 happened, right, they started pulling people out of line that they thought might do a 9/11. And generally speaking, those people looked like me, right? I mean, like, that's the reality. And it was funny because at first, the people pulling me out of line looked like me too. And it was like, hey, we look alike. And they're like, yeah, buddy, but, I would pull me out of line. And I could have been like, well, they're racist and they're whatever. And it's like, they're just doing their jobs, right? And it bothers me, and it bothers me still, but it didn't, like, there was nothing I could do about that. But what I could do is make it less likely or easier for them to do their jobs, right? So I would just be very careful about how I packed and where I put things and, all that kind of stuff, so that it just made the whole experience easier. And so I controlled what I could, right? So why do you think that somebody might have an external locus of control? There's all kinds of good reason for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because I do get really triggered when people have an external locus of control. So sometimes I need to remember that maybe they have a legitimate reason for coming from that space. Sometimes people have past traumatic experiences that can cause them to feel like things are out of their control. An example. Not a real example, but a fake example, just so everyone knows it's not me. But what if, when you were a child, your childhood home was destroyed by flood, right? All right, it's like something really traumatic in your formative years that make you feel like things are out of your control. The way you were raised by your parents, cultural influences. If you are from a culture that emphasizes external focuses, like or forces that like fate and luck and things like that, just from a culture perspective, you might have a slightly different way of interpreting the events around you. Your work environment, if you have a micro manager, like every aspect of your work life is controlled by someone else down to the smallest detail, that could reinforce that kind of external locus of control. Yeah. So what have you seen, Anil, in terms of why this might happen?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes it can be, like you were saying, cultural or socioeconomic, right? Like that you've had a series of experiences that lead you to this belief that others are in control, sometimes it's just learned helplessness, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have a series of things that occur, and it's natural to just believe that that cycle is going to continue, right? Good or bad. And the other thing that I've seen is sometimes it's educational, right? Like you can be taught. So I went to Catholic school as a
That explains it.
and I was not the nun's favorite. But you know that whole influence, that right, that belief that there is an external force that has written and unwritten rules about why you should and shouldn't do things. That
Mm-hmm.
can cause you to believe a certain way. And then the other one that I think is kind of interesting is media influence. Like that's a new one that we're kind of learning about, and it's becoming really prevalent, this notion that things are happening to you or around you because of others, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or because some outside force is taking away something, right? And so I think that it's becoming more prevalent in some cases, in some instances, but there are things that we can do about it, right? And I think the other thing that I want to say here is that having an external or internal locus of control, it's not bad or good, right? There are times where you have to have a balance of the two, right? Like I was talking about rain, like you, as hard as you can try, you cannot control the rain. It is going to fall whether you like it or not. But there are things that you can do about how it impacts you or affects you, or your plans around it, or things like that. And so I think it's important that we understand that there has to be a balance, but that having a primarily internal locus of control probably makes you happier. It probably makes you feel more positive about life and how things
Yeah,
work.
there's some pretty compelling statistics out there around people's happiness. Significantly, people with internal locus of controls are significantly more happy. The way they're reporting, they're significantly more engaged at work when they have an internal locus of control. So there is some scientific research to support that, and we'll put that in the show notes for sure for
Yeah,
folks.
yeah, and it's powerful. So how do we, as I mean, because after my experience with the seminar enrolling, I really kind of shifted my mindset, and I'm a really strong believer that for the most part you have control, particularly in the right work and things like that. You have a lot of control. So what are some effective ways? What are things that we can leave people with to kind of foster internal locus control within teams or within organizations that you're working in?
Yeah, so there's some things. Again, if you have a super deep external locus of control, you may not be able to get someone over to the other side. I
Mm,
mean, I'll just state that right away. But you can certainly encourage people to do some personal reflection, like when did you do something, you personally do something that led to a positive result, and bring those to the forefront of someone's thinking. You can also do things like, what is one small goal that you can set for yourself this week that you have full control over? And I've used this one before in particularly frustrating work environments where people do feel very much out of control, and they're like, okay, we're just going to work on what we are in control of this week, right? So we can get that win. The other thing is just walking through the steps to solve a problem. So if you're faced with something that seems like it's from external forces, you can start breaking that down and say, what are the steps that we can do to help mitigate this problem or get to a satisfactory result? What are your
yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. I concur with all of those, and it makes me think about. So when I was when I was at Discover, one of the early in my career, way before the turn of the century.
Love it.
um, so there was this big issue around attrition, and I worked in IT, and it was right before Y2K, and right,
Mhm.
that's the market was exploding. People were leaving everywhere, right? And
Mhm.
there was this belief that that's just the way that it was, right? Like we should just expect 25-30% attrition. And um, I really felt like that just didn't have to be the case.
Yeah.
So we examined why that attrition was happening in IT. So it was a small kind of pocket
Mm.
of folks, 1,000
Interesting
folks.
that you were
Yeah,
having this attrition.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Well, it was
Yeah.
the only one that I really cared about because
Yeah.
that's where I was employed. I'm sure there was
Hmm.
attrition in other places, but who cares? So we examined why, and actually were able to come up with specific reasons about why people were leaving or why they were becoming disenfranchised within the organization. And we put plans in place in that organization that were within our control to begin to mitigate that. And we're able to turn that around pretty quickly, right? We cut it in half in 6 months and got it down to single digits in 18 months.
Wow.
It was really it really helped me see that, yeah, you can't control everything. If you're going to double somebody's salary, of course they're going to leave. I would leave too. But
Hmm.
there are things that you can do to help not get people to that point where they're looking. And so I think that's just a really good example. And the four things that I think about to help people kind of get away from this idea of an external locus of control is that, like you were saying, like help them see that they have a little bit of power, at least some modicum of it, and that what that there are things that they can do that can impact and influence
Hmm.
actions. That there's one other example. It just happened really recently. I had a person that I work with. They had ordered a replacement laptop, and it was like 2 months in the waiting. And yeah, I know, right? And it's like they were cobbling this laptop, from magic parts or something. I don't know what was going on. They were wearing gloves while they were putting this together, mittens while they were putting it together or something. And um, this person kept responding to the ticket that had like, "Hey, where is this thing? Where is this thing? Where is this thing?" And so they came to me and said, "Hey, can you help?" And so what I did was I went out onto our corporate site, and I looked up numbers and who was uh, um, who was in charge of purchasing and ordering, and I reached out to them and I said, "Hey,
Yes.
I know this is not a big deal, but this person has been waiting for 2 months. Who can help me?" And they were like, "Well, I'm a big important person, and so you should talk to this person." And so I
Mhm.
went to that person, and all of a sudden, just by all I did was look up a name, and I just reached out to that person because we all work for the same company,
Mhm.
and the problem got solved. So and when I talked to the individual that came to me, I really tried to enforce that you could have literally done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I am no better, no different. And so
Yeah.
to me, it's that notion of, examine your choices, like what did you do? And and then look at what are the things that I could do to impact this. And maybe like you said, there's nothing, right? And you gotta ask for
Mhm.
help. But it's important that you reflect on your choices to see like what are things that I could have done differently or better for the next time. So
Yeah. So there's so much meat in this topic, and um, everything that we can't cover in the podcast we put into the show notes. So if you want to know more about why people might have an external locus of control, because it's important to understand if you want to course correct, right? You have to understand and have the empathy of like where people are coming from. But all of that is in the show notes along with some supporting research.
Yeah, and there is a lot of good information in there, and we ask that you take a look at it and share it, right? And really begin to think about for yourself how you can have an increased internal locus of control. So, and today in this episode, no analogies about food because I'm not hungry. But rest assured, there will be others. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Monster in My Closet, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
As we wrap up another episode here at Monster in My Closet, we want to thank you, our fearless listeners, for joining us on this journey of exploring what scares us or when we're scary. Professionally, of course. Together, we've ventured deep into the workplace wilderness armed with humor, insights, and a touch of irreverence, and hopefully learned something together along the way. But our journey doesn't end here. Monster in My Closet is proud to be part of Medusas.org. Medusas is a membership-driven, non-profit organization serving underrepresented groups, minorities, and individuals with disabilities who are doing business in the software-as-a-service space. We're a community created by SaaS professionals, for SaaS professionals, and even the SaaS curious. Visit Medusas.org to discover how you can contribute to a movement that empowers professionals to face their workplace monsters head-on. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your colleagues, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us shine a light on the monsters lurking in the professional closet, making our community braver, stronger, and a little bit wiser. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo, embrace the journey, and remember, no monster is too big when we face it together. Cheers.